To him earlier to understand the impact a retrial would have on the accusers. We appreciate you joining us today. I just want to ask you, first of all, what is your reaction to this court's verdict?
Well, today's verdict, actually, the appeal that overturned the conviction from 2 years ago or so, really is a step back. It's really, unfortunately, a tragic decision. So many hours went into the prosecution of Harvey Weinstein. There were 6 victims who testified at that trial, and now there'll have to be a retrial in the coming months or years. And it's really going to re-traumatize the victims that have to go to trial. They have to be cross-examined again, prepared for trial. And it's really just a very unfortunate ruling.
You said, in fact, earlier today that today's decision is a major step back in holding those accountable for acts of sexual violence. What do you mean by that?
Well, proving a sexual assault or a rape is not an easy task. You have to prove it by showing beyond a reasonable doubt. You have to convince all 12 jurors of that as well. And these cases usually fall on the question of intent. And other states in the U.S., as well as the federal rules, allow other uncharged crimes to show the propensity or the predisposition of the accused. In New York, though, it doesn't allow that. What New York allows only are certain exceptions, one of which is intent. And that's why the prosecutors were able to call those 3 witnesses. The Court of Appeals, the highest court in New York, now has said that was wrong. But the judge actually had a very reasoned decision when he ruled at the trial level. The DA wanted 5 extra witnesses. He said 3 was enough. And it goes to show that Harvey Weinstein was aware of the victim's lack of consent, that he knew exactly what was going on. And that's how the DA was able to show the intent that was required to prove their case. Now they're going to have to retry the case. They'll have the 2 victims, the 2 charging victims that remain, but they won't be able to have the other witnesses to show this level of intent.
And these other witnesses are called prior bad acts witnesses. They're brought in, as you said, to maybe talk more broadly about the person on trial, but are not related to the actual accusations or charges themselves. Weinstein's lawyers said that he didn't get a fair trial because of the use of those prior bad acts witnesses. Do you agree with that?
I disagree with that. And his lawyers actually said today was a victory for all criminal defendants. So I guess, they're on the side of making sure that defendants don't go to jail. I'm on the side of making sure that victims get their voices heard and people are held accountable for their actions, consistent with due process. But as I said, the issue of intent is a really difficult thing to prove in the sexual assault context because it's typically a he said, she said scenario. So these other uncharged witnesses, they actually help the prosecution show that the alleged wrongdoer knew exactly what was going on, that it wasn't consent, that they were aware of the victim's lack of consent. And so now victims are hamstrung. And, the reason why it's a step back is because they see that coming forward doesn't always work out the way it really ought to in a fair trial.
Just looking more broadly now, what do you think this ruling will do to the Me Too movement itself, maybe the willingness for some victims to come forward and to put themselves through the legal process?
Well, I mean, I've been doing this now for over 20 years, and so I've seen the world change. In 2011, I represented the maid in the Dominique Strauss-Kahn sexual assault case, and the Manhattan District Attorney at the time, Cyrus Vance, decided not to prosecute that case. We then had the Me Too movement. The same district attorney, Cyrus Vance, decided to bring the case against Harvey Weinstein. So I've really seen the positive changes because of the Me Too movement, that victims' voices were heard, that they could come forward, that people would be held accountable, that law enforcement would take their concerns and their cases seriously. the message, I think, at least in the short term, is that victims can go and testify and cooperate with law enforcement, but defense lawyers still have a playbook of typical methods to try and not only discredit them at trial, but also to legally maneuver and get a jury verdict of 12 people overturned. So I think it's a real setback.
Douglas Wigdor, lawyer who has represented Weinstein victims in New York. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.